So, I am speaking with one known as the Mighty Chicken, who is regularly on my Blasphemers Bible show. And you, sir, you responded to something that I was talking about education, and you said that we needed to talk. Yeah, so, I want to hear your whole background story on that.
So I'm an after-school teacher, specifically for Sylvan. I'm sure that everyone knows about Sylvan education. And my thing is, I have about 3 to 4 kids at a time that I teach, and I've got a chance to see them from as young as say first grade up to even post college and postgraduate stuff. And when I watched your video the other day about the after school Satanist Club, which I thought was a great idea. I think it's wonderful that we should allow everyone to have an opportunity to have some fun activities after school. What I was appalled by that really got me going was seeing what these people who were trying to stop it from happening, what they were saying and what the representations were. So I saw a lady on there, for example, not to visually dox her, but she had a cross clearly on her chest. I'm guessing she's probably Catholic or something like that. Looks very like that. She sounds very quiet, very reserved, probably very submissive. And she's also a teacher. And what really irritated me about that was what she was saying was that the devil actually exists. He's real. And this is the thing that we have to prevent from our schools to protect our children from second grade to fifth. And I thought, you piece of shit. I was so mad because what she's doing is the one thing that I absolutely hate from a educational point of view. Because, and I'm very passionate about this, but this is how I've always viewed about it. Educators have one major job to do. One, we have to show how to learn, teach children the right things to think about. And what I mean the right things is using their own ability to be able to think critically about the world around you. And
The
what
way I heard it was that teachers are supposed to teach what to think. Well, excuse me, teachers teach how to think,
that's
not
right.
what to think.
Exactly. And so that's something I hold strongly to. So my opinions, my beliefs, I am never allowed to ever impart that onto a child's brain. Never. My job is to show them this is what we know. This is what we've learned to this point. This is all of these experiences, including religions. These are the things that people had considered, believed. These are wonderful myths of history. I never knock someone for their religiosity directly. I mean, I don't believe and I never will because nothing convinces me otherwise. I can also show how the Bible is completely wrong for that specific belief system easily using the Bible itself. The Quran's the same way, so is the Bhagavad Gita. All of these different religions can be disproven with themselves in our logical concepts of modern day science for what their beliefs are for their gods. Not saying that a God doesn't exist. It's not saying the afterlife doesn't exist. It's metaphysical. It's beyond our physical world to understand. These are things, of course, that you've said thousands of times, but that's the key about it. So, what I have to do is to shape their brains, to show them all these things, and never allow them to think except for what they can think for themselves. So, my goal is to make sure that they can recognize when they make a mistake. And if they choose a religious path, then I will say, okay, well, why is that? And then we'll break it down and show them where their mistakes are, or at least not even the mistakes, but where they may be thinking differently to lead them towards that decision to see if there's a better way to look at the world. And that's our job. So when I see a religious person like that teacher and a few others who were very clearly saying things from a religious and political point of view, which you can't unmarry the two anymore, which is insane to me, or probably ever could. When I see that, it just it shows so much of how the world today and how, at least in the United States, how we are so bad at teaching our kids. Good teachers also don't keep those jobs anymore because they could get fired for expressing their own atheistic beliefs. Now, what I'm referring to this is because I live in Washington State. I have no problem saying that. We have certain laws here around um, when you are an employee of a company, the employer has the right at any time to terminate your employment for any reason without any justification of any kind, unless you're with a union or you're a federal agent of some kind. There might be other ones too, but the laws really clearly state this point. And what it means is that they can't outright say, well, we're going to fire you because, of religious reasons, because that's against the First Amendment, and then they would have a lot of litigations and whatnot to do. But they can say, well, we don't need your services any longer. And then you're out of the job. So if I were to ever say something like this, I would have to be very careful, because if the kids hear something, then it takes to their parents say something to my administrator, and it could be very awkward or uncomfortable for them to keep me around, and it's easier to get rid of me as opposed to trying to change the whole curriculum.
So here in Texas, I got into the newspapers several years ago when they passed this Merry Christmas bill. And when Rick Perry, who was governor at the time, signed it into effect, he made a reference to me and a number of other activists that were arguing against this bill. As I said, I was in the papers over it. He said that freedom of religion is not freedom from religion. That's what he said to the camera as he signed this into law. The Merry Christmas bill was a bill that was encouraging teachers to out their religious beliefs, to share their religious beliefs with their kids on the holidays. So you don't say Happy Holidays, you say Merry Christmas, unless you believe in something else. Then you say Happy Hanukkah and let everybody know that you're Jewish. Or you say something else to let everybody know that you're atheist or pagan or Muslim or whatever, because the government wants non-Christian teachers to be identified. They want their students to know what the teachers believe or don't.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. That whole thing is, yeah, I remember seeing that in the news. I didn't know that you were actually notified, and I will kind of say congratulations. You're now really famous, right? So, I mean, that's, I guess, a good thing that Rick Perry said your name, but I would also.
No, he didn't say my name. He made reference.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, because that was
I was going to say shout out to Aaron Ra. Like,
that was the primary thing in the story, was that, freedom of religion means freedom from religion, right? You can't have the teachers that, I mean, I know a lot of atheist teachers, and like you, they don't let their kids know that they're atheist, because if they do, they don't get so much pushback from the students, but they get hella pushback from the parents and especially administrators.
Yes. Not just that, but also your fellow teachers. And I even had an incident the other day where I had an after-school meeting. Well, not meeting. It was just an after-school chit-chat in the faculty room with one of my fellow teachers, because one thing I do want to talk about also is how bad education has happened the last few years alone. COVID really messed up the kids, and not just because of the sickness and the death and everything else that occurred. My grandmother even died from COVID, for example. A lot of my friends got COVID. They're fine, but it affected so many people. But it really damaged the kids, and it damaged the kids because Trump's administration, and of course, incidentally, Biden's as well, the lack of movement on their part, they really screwed up how kids are taught. And the online system that they had set up was incredibly mismanaged. It was as mismanaged as the cold weather crisis that happened in Texas with you guys. It was a joke. And the kids are literally about 3 years behind. There's a few exceptions that some good kids are, really well off, but I can't believe that I'm even saying this, that there are some students who are in 5th grade who can't even spell their own name. They do not know how to write. They're not taught handwriting anymore. Of course, the cursive's not a thing. And you know what the one thing that the kids ask to do as a fun activity after their work is done with me, if they're doing math or science, they want to do cursive. They want to learn cursive from me. So I've been doing that. I've been teaching them little snippets of poetry, trying to get their brains going and have them practice the writing skills. It's not about the writing part even. It's about the practice of the discipline of it, because then it goes on to everything else. And I was having a conversation with this lady, my fellow coworker. She's generally a nice person, but I already know, because I could tell from what she was said, that she's very right wing leaning, and I have no problem with that. She's also likely very religious. I have no proof of this, but everything that she said very, very clearly remarks to me that that's what it was. And I was saying that the handwriting of the kids is just absolutely terrible, and I told her that I'm really frustrated. I'm trying to help these guys, and I just don't know what the teachers are doing to teach their kids. And she took that as a cue to talk about. She kind of stumbled a little bit when she was talking. She's like, "Oh well, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, they don't even know what pluralism. I can't say the words. Sorry, using the words that are plural, such as they and them." And she said, "Yeah, they just don't know how to say they. I mean, kids are just saying they and that." She just went on a tirade. It's like she turned into her beast form. It's like she's got more powerful. Oh, they and them. It's like, oh God, you're talking transgender issues. Why are you doing this? And I'm just smiling here, just going, oh, okay, yeah, great, okay. Not trying to give off any information or to allude that I lean one way or think one way or whatever, because even with teachers, I don't want anyone to know what I am unless I talk to them directly. But she felt that she was okay doing that with me. She felt it was a test on me to kind of see where I was. And that was a litmus test. She was like trying to figure out if I am on her side or not. And I just thought, it's so frustrating me because she's been a teacher for like 25, 30 years professionally at a local school district where I live. She teaches children all the time. And I just think to myself, like, what have you been teaching, even subconsciously, from your assumed moral beliefs and imparting upon these very impressionable children, just like that lady who was standing up at in the last video that you posted? And I just think to myself about this all the time also, how ridiculous it is that we are allowing our beliefs and our personal opinions to influence how we educate. It has to always be secular, not because it's a religious thing. It's just because we have to provide the information as it is that we know right now, and then allow them the opportunity to decide for themselves what direction to take. They could eventually become a pastor or a clergyman. Okay, well then that's their path, and it's probably a fault of a teacher or someone else that probably guides them that way, but it's still their decision after they've been through the system. And I hate the word system, but that's how we collectively call it here.
Yeah. So basically, if you're in the clergy, what are you? Professional liar? Is that it?
Yeah.
I mean, when you have a doctorate,
I've wondered,
is that not the same thing as a PhD in Mother Goose?
I have someone in my family who has a PhD in that, and I really do wonder. Oh, Mother Goose. Kids don't even know what Mother Goose is, by the way. Some of them don't. Ugh, I was blown away. That aside, though, yes, it really is a question on, are they just professional liars? And I think that a lot of them are. In fact, I'm pretty convinced that I would say at least 90% probably are. Specifically the Catholics.
I know specific examples that definitely are. And like, when we're talking about a religious apologist whose job is countering evolution with arguments for creationism, all of those are professional liars. They know they're full of shit.
Mm-hmm. I had one of my students.
And how do I know that?
Oh,
because I proved it over and over again with these people, but they cannot answer questions.
No.
They will never make a correction. They only change the subject. Once you've proven that what they just said is wrong, well, let's talk about this then. No. Let's get an admission on this. But there's all kinds of flailing about. There will never be a concession that what they said is wrong. That it becomes an opinion what the facts are. No, it doesn't.
There's a single word that I've always used to define people who have leaned that direction in religiousness of any kind. They are the most terrified people in the world. And that's not an exaggeration by my part. Their entire existence, their lives are built on the concept of being fearful of oppression or recompense for horrible actions or presumed horrible actions done after you die. Or that you're being watched 24/7, and so that every single action you take has to be monitored. This is why you hear all the time, obviously you've heard this many times, about how we can't have morality without God. Bullshit. I am a moral person, thank you very much. I like to do the good things. Am I ever this way? No. Do I study this stuff? Sure.
When they ask me, how do you have morality without God? I say, how do you have morality with
God? Yeah.
Because there's no answer to that question.
No.
Yeah, but the only thing I get is from people saying that the only reason that they're not out raping and killing and vandalizing everything and stealing is the only reason they're not doing all of those things for the fun of it, they say, is because they know they can't escape God. Now, I think, okay, then you're not a moral person to begin with if you think that raping and killing and vandalizing and stealing would be fun.
I can't remember who it was that I saw on probably some television show or whatever, but it was there was a politician, I think he was a senator, of course, in some state that's not around here, that specifically said on camera something to the effect that he was okay with following along with the idea of stoning people in the streets because it's okay to do so, and that he's okay with reinstituting the concept of slavery. And this guy's the suit-wearing Republican professional senator.
I've seen a handful of Republicans in the last, say, 5 years or so that have, 2 or 3 of them that made public statements to the effect that they actually support reinstating slavery.
Of all the things I've ever studied, this is the one thing that really just makes my skin crawl. And I actually teach students about Civil War and how we did our version of slavery, which is hard to concept, and I'm probably going to get some people who disagree with me. It was not directly racist. It was economic. It turned into racist after the war because they had no one else to blame, and they lost all their money. The Reconstruction was terrible, and it led towards all of these horrible things. The Jim Crow laws, which I heard got reinstated, some of them did in Mississippi. What the fuck is that about? Give me a break.
Yeah,
who are these people? Read a book.
The 2 ways that the United States became the richest country was, one, we held on to slave labor much longer than a lot of the other so-called first world countries. And another, we became America's drug dealer. So
yes,
we produced tobacco in world distribution. We became the world distributor for what turned out to be one of the most addictive drugs ever. Mm-hmm. So the tobacco industry and slave labor to produce the tobacco industry,
which then eventually led towards the cotton gin and allowing for that opportunity to be able to be more economic for that. And don't forget indigo. We changed the whole world with our indigo production. And so all of the early stuff with tobacco brought all those slaves here, and now the market was open, and then these other industries came in and make it literally their only way of making money. After the Civil War, the South was devastated. They were the ones in the wrong from the very beginning, but it was also a holdover from when the Constitution was written. It was a mistake by the Founding Fathers, but it was a compromise because many of the states would not even ratify it or even show up. That's a big myth. They were not all there in that great, beautiful procession you see of that painting. Not true. You want a good visual example of that? There's a fun movie called John Adams, which is pretty close to accurate. Not perfect. There's some flaws there. But it shows that quite nicely that they did not get along because, oh, that's right, they're people just like us. They have their prejudices, they have their opinions, they have their desires for wealth, they had their Donald Trumps and all that crap back then too, and nothing was going to get done unless they had to make do with making compromises. The reason why separation of church and state was not outright abolishment. The reason why slavery was omitted, because of the same reason, because they push it on for the further generations. There's a very famous set of quotes about that from, I can't remember if it was Washington or Jefferson.
I know that there were a couple of people who were advocating for the abolishment of slavery right at the founding of the country.
I think it was John Adams.
Wouldn't have it.
Yes, I think it was John Adams who said that. You're challenging me right now, and I can't recall. I'm sure that the chat's probably.
I can't remember the names either, and I don't want to say Jefferson if that wasn't the one, but it was somebody who held slaves at that time. But wants not just to let go of his own slaves and suffer the financial right for that, but he wants to criminalize slavery altogether, abolish slavery across the country, which would mean that he no longer holds slaves, just like everybody else that held slaves, because that was something they saw. The way the conservatives do things, very often they say that there is no progress. I mean, my grandfather told me that they've already invented everything they're ever going to invent. In 1970, he said that.
Has he ever seen a smartphone?
Yeah, well, they're not. They don't. If there is a new way to do something, a better way to do something, a more efficient way to do something, The conservative answer usually is, we've been doing it this way since my grandpa was a baby. We're going to keep doing it this way, right? We do things the way we always done them. That's conservative, sticking with the old way, the good old days, rather than fixing fuck all.
As I'm sure you and I both know, there's no such thing as the good old days, and the good old days had atrocities and horrors that you can never even imagine if you really put it in context. So that's a beautiful, beautiful fallacy that too many people, I think, don't understand is a mistake in logic.
And what they call it now, of course, it's not the good old days. It's when America was great, when only straight, white, Protestant, Christian, rich men had rights.
They have no idea of their own history. And that's kind of what my biggest issue is I actually spoke to my father this morning, had an interesting conversation with him about how is it, because he came from a family of 6. Primarily there were 4 kids, and then there were 2 that came after the next 10 years. And his folks were horrifically Catholic. I mean, they were the racist, Bible-thumping, hardcore, get on your knees and pray to the Lord type Catholic. We're talking as much as you can get. And he's not. But he asked questions later on in life, and he escaped all of that. But what's fascinating about the conversation we had was I was asking him, when you separate your family out as large as you do, because the Bible says be fruitful and multiply, you don't get the attention of your parents to focus on you. You also have other issues where the attention is then changed upon what the parents believe. And kids are very impressionable, and they want so badly to cling on to the love of their parents at all costs. And now they have to fight over it with the more hands that are trying to grab that. Think about how horrible the Duggar family is. We all know what happened there. And that's a prime example of where if you have this concept of too many kids, you can't feed them, you can't train them, you can't do anything with them, you can't even hold their hands across the street. And so having some of those kids go and becoming religious because they want their attention of their mother and father is very likely and very easy, because they're trying to get any attention that they can. Or if it's not religion, it's something else, walking in daddy's footsteps or whatever else it might be. And so I asked him some serious questions about that, because I wanted to think about how is it that we could have that kind of problem that's still permeating today. And it was really interesting how his perspective of growing up was, I always had to fight for the attention of my folks. He was the 4th child. So his eldest sister was the eldest of the girls. And so she was the one that was the most aggressive, but she was very sneaky about it. And the second in line was his brother. And he was the loud, aggressive, here, hold my beer and do a thing, right? He's also the crazy nut in our family that has all the guns and is scary as hell. But I can tell you about that some other time. What's interesting to me, though, is that what we have today in our world is a disconnect between allowing your belief system to dictate how you think about things, as opposed to looking at things first and then coming up with a correct conclusion. We always make assumptions first that, this must be a thing, therefore it has to be this. And you said earlier about how clergy, for example, are doing this because they're just professional liars. I would say a lot of them are, and I agree with you. There are some that are just simply duped, who are just so afraid of these questions. What is life? Why are we here? What is death? I'm terrified of the concept of not being here. And those things are so deeply ingrained into the human psyche that they try to seek those types of answers. And when they don't get it from their family because it's being split apart, or their family are just not good parents, or whatever else might be, and their society is bad, or their clergy is bad, yada, 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 they have to seek it out in any way they can. My sister's a good example of that. And this is one of those things where you can see the world that we have today and the way that it's leaning is why there's so many extreme conservative, don't want to learn anything new people who are so terrified of the possibilities of what the world is that they have to hold on to it for dear life. And that's why they're becoming so loud now, and why they're proudly proclaiming their Christianity or religion of any kind, but also doing policies if they're in a political situation or in a teaching scenario, because they're feeling that they are losing what little grasp on reality that they are comfortable with. It's nonsense, but they never got the hug that they needed, either from the parent or somebody. And I'm being very general with this because there's a lot of factors involved. There's mental things, a whole bunch of stuff. But what I've always seen to be the case is that there are so many children that grow up not understanding the right ways of going, and they become very susceptible to these types of things.
One of the things that I was confronted with as a kid is when, and these always shocked me, when people would tell me how they're against progress. By definition, how could somebody be against progress? I heard many times the phrase that ignorance is bliss, in a direct contradiction to the idea that knowledge is power. And I remember saying a number of things that shocked and horrified the adults around me when I was like 8 years old. I remember saying that first impressions are almost always wrong because they're based on prejudice. They're based on superficial appearances. And it's after you talk to somebody and start to understand what the situation is, then you realize, okay, well, your first guess was, why is this person dressed like this? Why do they look like that? What are they about to say to me? It's all going by your preconceived notions, right? Which are very often false. And I get stark opposition. No, first impressions are never wrong, I was told, because they're given to you by God. They're divined. Like, how do you deal with that? How do you assume that somebody is homeless because of the way they look, and then you discover that they just got in a car wreck or just got in a fight or something? They were just mugged or whatever, and that's why their clothes look like that. Well, then that first impression was wrong, wasn't it? But of course, confirmation bias, they never allow that sort of thing.
That's a very fascinating thing that you said about that, because when you look at someone and you make a judgment call, it's literally the concept of looking at a book by its cover, and you're not getting the context within. One of my personal big sayings is context is everything. It doesn't matter what the conversation is. Individual words have no power unless you give them power. It's the context behind the meaning of those words. That's where the power comes from. And also how someone looks or how someone represents themselves, how people believe, all these things. You can't garnish that in the first few minutes of talking to somebody. You can get a superficial idea, because I'm pretty convinced that we are evolutionary designed to kind of do a quick check, identify what something is, and then make a mental assessment and then move on. Because that's kind of the holdover of our prior existences. And so that's probably what they're coming from. They're still wrong. You're totally right about this. But the thing that's so amazing to me about it is that I live with my parents. I'm 39 years old. I'm not happy to say that on out loud, but I wanted to tell you and everyone else who's listening, because I'm college educated. I'm about to go back to get my master's degree. I have very little money left. I've had many different career paths. I used to work at Google. I used to work at Microsoft, and I was held hostage by that. The only reason why I'm not on the street is that my folks were very generous to allow me a single spot in their retirement house. Not a home, but like their home that they got together. My folks should be enjoying their time by themselves. And I'm definitely making it hard on them. It's not because my generation, for example, is lazy or whatever else it might be. I've actually had to have 3 jobs at one point.
Well, I can't say anything to contradict your generation, because I found out recently I'm a boomer.
Okay, boomer. Doesn't matter.
Gen X my whole life.
You know what? The generational thing is nonsense. I just go by age and that sort of thing. Like I said, I was born in '83, so like people from my generation really do understand. Like
apparently, I was born in the last year of the boomer, and when they started doing these, they had different criteria before they started. I mean, before they came up with the name Gen X, for example, they had a different listing for. It was supposed to be like 2 years before I was born was when the next generation was going to begin. I remember in the 70s, there was something on TV. They were going to call it the Me generation. So Generation X was in, I don't know, 1970 something,
Yeah.
early 70s, they said it was going to be
Mhm.
called the me generation. Never took on, but that's what I thought I was. I was the me generation that ended up being Gen X, and then I found out, well, no, it's not 19 1960 on, it's or 1959 on, it's 1962 on. So
I'm only about a year or so away from, I think, anyway, of being Gen X myself. Honestly, though, and I could be wrong about this, I believe that the whole thing got started by Time Magazine. So you can see how important that is. It doesn't mean a damn thing. It never has. It's just the prior generations from different age groups. You had a different growing up, of course, and experiences than I would have. I mean, my parents are the same
I
way my
was
grandparents did.
I was in the stereotypical situation of being common for what was more Gen X than a boomer kind of a thing. I was the latchkey kid, the only child latchkey kid. So the parents are divorced. This was common for
Mm-hmm.
for my generation. I'm going to say not the boomer, but the generation. The people in my age group were commonly um, of single parents. The parent is working. The kids come home from school, and they are in the house by themselves. And so I was
Yeah.
alone since about 8. I pretty much raised myself.
Wow. I didn't. I was lucky and had my folks. They're still together. They definitely fight a lot, but that's been the fun part of it all. But I'm very unusual that way, and we were not rich in my family at all. In fact, we're not rich at all now. We're quite poor. Have been for years. Still managed to have fun Christmases and things. And by the way, when I say Christmas, my family is partly German, so we celebrate the German versions of that. So Santa Claus and that sort of thing is with a
And
Tannenbaum Christmas
Krampus.
tree and good old Krampus. Yeah, my grandfather was once Krampus, and that was interesting. They used to call him Crampa. Sorry, that was a bit of a joke there, but anyway. But yeah, we had a very non-religious holiday, though. I mean, I still listen to Christian music all the time, Little Drummer Boy, all that stuff. But I didn't hear it when I was a child as religious because I wasn't raised that way. I didn't even know what religion was until I got cornered by a really cute girl when I was in third grade, and she kissed me on the school door, and she told me that she was Jewish and Christian, and I thought, "What's that?" You
Jewish
know?
and Christian.
Yes, her father was Christian and her mother was Jewish.
Okay.
Yes. So,
And
and I
of
was
course,
very jealous.
that would make her neither, not both.
I guess so. Well, she thought it was
My
both because
family was largely
she used to
Mormon. My
she used to
family
get
was
presents, and that's what she said all the time. So
my
I was jealous of her.
yeah, some of my family will say that they're Mormon. Some of them just say that they're Christian. What it means in every case is that they've never cracked open a Bible. They don't know what a creed
Well,
is. They don't care what the Bible says. It's just a T-shirt they put on so that they can get out of the argument and just pretend that they're better than everyone else. And that's literally what it means. I'm
yeah.
not kidding. I know people. There are people in my family, for example, on your fourth marriage, alcoholic, drug addicted, fornicator with 4 felony convictions, but you're better than me because you're Christian. Whatever the fuck
Yeah,
that means.
I know what that is too. Yeah, it's this inflated idea of what they think they are just because they happen to be a part of a fun little group of friends. It's like saying that that I'm better than you because I'm a part of the Boy Scouts, or I was a hiker, or whatever else it might be, or I played with Legos. I'm better than you. Or is that
Well,
sort of nonsense?
there's an interesting thing. If you've never read the Bible at all,
Mhm.
you've done no study whatsoever. In what way are you better than anybody? In what way are you Christian? Let's just take out the drug addicted, alcoholic, fornicator on your fourth marriage and felony conviction and so forth. Because everybody in my family had 4 marriages.
Wow,
Just
that's
everybody.
amazing.
Yeah, I've only been married twice.
Mhm. I only was ever engaged once, and that didn't go anywhere. But yeah,
Well, I guess common law married 3 times, but I only ever went to 2 ceremonies.
honestly, once you're done with the first one, you can just kind of write off the rest. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
It's like, I've been there, done that. Here, just here's some flowers. Oh, let's go home.
And every subsequent wedding dress is a little further off white.
Yeah. Preferably not from dirt on it, though. That's the only thing. My goodness.
Yeah.
But yeah, though, I'm very concerned about. To get back on what we were talking about before, I'm very worried about the direction of how the next generation is going to be taught. I'm hoping to get a chance to work somehow in the mainstream as an official, like, school board teacher. That's my goal anyway. That's why I'm currently studying to get my certification for that. And the thing that worries me, though, is that even though that there's the teachers union and whatnot that protects the teachers, there's not a lot of money in it. I have no idea how I'm going to live unless I get married or find some other form of income, and it's not really easy right now. Again, that's why I am where I am. I get paid very little, even though I love what I do. Oh, it's such a great job. It's so much fun, but I get paid nothing for it. And it's not the school's fault directly necessarily, even though you could argue it is. It's the concept that teachers are not worth enough. And what we are getting instead are people who are usually either relatively well off or they have a spouse who makes a lot of money, and then that other spouse can then go become a teacher. And a lot of them are very religious. I don't have statistics to prove what I said, but this is, again, what I've been observing from my firsthand experience. And hearing what those people said on that day about trying to stop the after-school program was a prime example of what I see. And I'm very concerned that when we don't teach secular concepts of education to a student, that we are going to be biasing children to be, well, pardon for the term here, but God knows what.
Yeah, I noticed one trend that alarmed me was how many of these people thought that this was about, it wasn't about equal rights of different religions. This wasn't about your right to believe what you do, your right to pursue your faith. It wasn't about, that, Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion and equal opportunity for religion, religious freedom. It wasn't about human rights. These people thought that this was Satan's personal rights, that Satan is a person and that he has rights. That's what these protesters were thinking.
Yeah. When I heard, there was two that I saw on the screen, maybe more, but I saw two specifically. One looks like a 24-year-old man in that really nice comb-over suit. Oh, what a great kid he is. And he was saying that crap. And I looked at that, and I'm like, what are you doing here? Look, I get you have your beliefs. I get you have your ideas about stuff. Okay, fine. I'm not going to debate that because that's not what I care about. But what you are doing is you're saying that someone else can't be something else or choose not to be what you are, that you think that you're better than them, as you said earlier, just because you've taken the cloth or whatever bullshit it might be.
Now, how many times have I heard someone like Newt Gingrich, while in Congress, decry Muslims as being satanic and simultaneously somehow atheist? So when he says,
love that conflation.
When he says satanic, he doesn't mean members of atheist organizations like the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple. When Newt Gingrich says it, he means somebody who believes in and worships the devil, right? Which Satanists don't believe in or worship the devil, right? But he thinks that Muslims do. And that somehow Muslims are also atheists, which means they don't believe in a God. But they worship a devil, even though they think they believe in God. How could someone like Newt Gingrich, and this always alarmed me, this is a man that was elected for Congress because of his intelligence. What else? Yeah. I mean, it's not because your physical prowess that they put you in Congress, it's because of your ability to make
decisions.
Especially
that man,
right?
Let me tell you. Whew.
And they put these people in Congress because they expect them to be able to make decisions or whatever, or expect them to be representative of their constituents, which of course they're not. They're representative of whatever special interest paid them off. That's why Christian Cinema. I'm not saying her name right. Why she
Christian
played the
Cinema.
part of a Democrat just
Kristen
to
Cinema. There we
obstruct
go.
everything the Democrats wanted to do until she became a millionaire overnight from receiving special interest payments, and then
Funny how that
declared that
works, huh?
she was never really a Democrat in the first place. So now she's independent.
The thing I've also found about
how do people
Democrats these days?
How do people get into office like
Man.
Newt Gingrich when you think that you can just say that? No, mind you, everybody knows I argue against Islam. I argue against all theism. I don't particularly hate Muslims more than I hate Christians. I don't hate people. I hate the belief systems because they are lies. And that's the thing that's wrong with them, is that they are lies. So I hate lies. Christianity is a lie. Islam is a lie. I would be happy to disabuse believers of these lies. That's my thought on it. But for those who have not been helped yet, right, we still have to be respectful of the fact that they exist in this condition, right? So, okay, so I'm not going to say that Christians are bad because, and I'm not going to say that Muslims are bad because, and that means that I'm not going to say that Muslims are atheist and devil worshippers, and nothing about that makes any sense. You put those three together, that Muslims are atheist devil worshippers. How the fuck does that make sense, even in Newt Gingrich's head?
It's the us versus them concept.
Everything is binary, isn't it? Black or white, good or evil, us, them.
Mm-hmm. And it's so much easier for you to be able to justify your own considerations or thoughts. It doesn't matter what it is, even if you hate the French. You know, I hear I'm not going to use the slurs.
The French. Let's not even bring up.
I mean, when I was a fencer, we used to make a joke whenever we heard a French where we had to spit in our mask, but that's something else entirely. I love the French. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Anyway, so the thing is that it's the us versus them concept goes beyond everything except for the basics of what human nature is. Humans, you may maybe disagree with me on this, I'm not sure, but I've always looked at how life is. Life has one real purpose. From what I've learned and what I've studied, it seems that the intention of life is to do a couple very specific things: eat, poop, split, and that's it. And so the idea is that you just kind of keep on splitting them cells again and again to grow bigger, and then you combine together. You have little things that start to come into small little brains and grow from there.
Perpetuation, and yes. The primary or the most effective way to do that is procreation.
Yes. And the way that we do it in our modern way may not be so directly observable that way, but we prop ourselves up. We have our feathers that we flop around to get the mate. If it's same sex or otherwise, doesn't matter. You get your mate, whoever it is. You want to accumulate your wealth if you're not successful with your feathers to get better looking feathers. And that is a form of power and control. Then you have the opportunity to get more of those things to come around you. So honestly, it really always comes down to sex. And I've thought about this a lot. And I really think that at its core, deep down, that's really what everything really is just the continuation of our species in a very base way, but we use every other excuse. We kill people to get their stuff to make us look better. We make nicer looking things to make us look better. We get more wealth and we accumulate. We have power and control. We have little wars between small things that we call kingdoms. We have all of this crap, and then we're still trying to come together as a people for the people who do not have as an ability to have this nice looking feathers to still have our little feather things. And I've always found that really seems to be the case with all of our societies. If you look at every part of the world, and you can look at the other parts of the animal kingdom as well and see the similarities there, it baffles me that we still do these things when we are able to recognize them through our studies of what these things are, and that we allow people, like the Rupert Murdochs and what of the world, to have such ungodly amounts of money because they managed to sneak through their system and know how to get the best looking feathers. Does it make them any better? No. But at a certain point, it becomes beyond that, and then it just becomes personal enjoyment of your own personal power. Money doesn't matter anymore, and it's all about being not bored. And that's kind of how I look at it.
The bigger issue for me is when you're looking at things in this binary perspective, and all you're concerned about is yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's it. I've often heard people say that, regarding the energy crisis of 1973, or other such things, like when they come out with anytime they talk about the environment, ecology, going for electric cars, whatever. There's always some guy that was like in my classroom and says, "Well, I got a '69 Chevelle, and it gets shitty mileage, but I'm going to keep driving it because it doesn't matter what I do. I ain't going to change the world." Right. You think that whatever you do isn't going to change the world. You're not thinking on a population level. But if you think on a population level, if you think about how much trash do I waste, how much just impact do I have in what I waste? And when they suggested that we could do recycling, I remember thinking, well, that's a good idea, because we're wasting an awful lot of these bottles and cans that just go in the trash. It doesn't make any sense to remine them.
No.
Just take the metal and glass we've already got, dump it in a facility that refashions it. That's a lot more effective. But then somebody says, and the reason is, well, I ain't never done that before, so I ain't ever gonna. I just throw my trash away. That's it. Why would I put it in a different bin to be recycled? Everything is about your inconvenience, personal inconvenience, no matter how trivial it is.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thinking on the population level. If you think on the population level about how many kids are we producing, or whatever it is, if you're thinking about your rights, then you're on the right. If you're thinking about somebody else's rights, well, then you're on the left. And the right is going to demonize you as if you're the one who's oppressing, as if you're the one. Somebody told me that if I'm on the left, then I would do well in China. And I said, well, no. Because I'm not an authoritarian like the Chinese communists and the American Republicans are. You should go to China because they're all about oppression, and they're all about forced conformity.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that one. I can't argue that. That's incredibly right. Yeah.
So I get tired of the labels and everything, but when you're talking about binary thinking and you're talking about two different perspectives, that's the way I see it. If you think on the population level, well, then that makes you some kind of a leftist. And if you're only thinking about you and fuck everybody else, then you're on the right.
It's very easy to demonize, like I said, because you can just justify any form of action. That's why we have people who are willing to do such atrocities. And I'm going to go on a limb here and say that there have been no other atrocities in history that have not been in the name of God, that you cannot look throughout the entire whole of history.
Well, there I can think of a couple, and a lot of believers will bring these up too. Like one of the worst ever was literally a denial of Darwinism. So Stalin,
you're right.
Stalin was gulagged scientists who promoted Darwinian theory of natural selection and that sort of thing. He wanted to go with Lamarck's.
Lamarckism.
Yeah, he had Lysenko was arguing that plants are communist, and that I don't remember what the argument was for that, but they were arguing for Lamarck's concept of acquired characteristics, and so that's what they were going to teach, and that's how they were going to do their farming industry. And so the result was the worst famine ever in recorded history. And Chairman Mao, who was also against Darwinian science, he followed the other communists, adopted the same policy, and brought that famine into China as well.
Yes. Yep.
So
no, you're right about that. I've done a pretty hefty study on Stalin, not as much as I'd like to say compared to other parts of World War II and that general era, or as I call it, the Great War era, which really started in 1914 onward.
Oh, and then the atrocity with Hitler and all of that. Again, it's a denial of Darwin, because Hitler was arguing the exact opposite of everything Darwin argued for.
Oh yeah, he was a hardcore creationist, and there's no way around it. I mean, my God, you hear about what was it? I can't remember. I think it was. Oh shucks, what's his name? He's the little troll-looking man who was in charge of the SS. Himmler. There we go.
Okay.
Himmler I couldn't remember the guy. I see his horrible face. I can't remember his name. He actually started a Teutonic Order, I believe, of some kind of the Nazi Party. That's probably the wrong name, but there is a place in Germany where they actually have a castle that was repurposed and was completely redone with beautiful marble and wonderful artwork that shows a whole bunch of Nazi symbolism. And it was essentially a shrine. And what they were going to do is they were going to have their great leaders and all of their great war heroes enshrined there as a worshiping point for the SS. They were going to deify them as the new forms of God under this form of this Naziist belief. It's completely creationist because of the whole, Aryan origins. But what the plan was, from all the things we read about, was it was going to be a melding of those two things together into a new form of religion that the Nazis were trying to create. And if they had proceeded to continue the war or won the war, that would have happened. And it's still there today, that location. I haven't been there, but I've seen a lot of videos on it. And it's incredibly fascinating what this was and what they were trying to accomplish. So yeah, anyone who says, I love this, well, all of those secular nations, those atheistic nations are the ones that cause the most deaths and tragedies throughout time. I was like, you obviously have never read a book. And you have no right to say anything because you do not understand that the Nazis, for example, were religious. Maybe not openly in some places, but they definitely were. They still had the Orthodox Church in Russia during the Great Purge too. Now, Stalin used that as a way to be able to control people because he didn't care about religion in any way himself. I'm not sure if he was religious or not. That's not the point. He liked power. He liked control. That's why he killed, so many people. He got rid of his opponents and argued that he might have been involved in the death of Lenin, for example. But you can also look at Pol Pot. You can look at Mao Zedong. They had different classic beliefs too.
Another interesting one because Pol Pot killed people who had glasses.
Yeah.
Because he thought that people who had glasses were smart.
And he came from a rich, smart family too.
So how stupid do you have to be if you think glasses make you smart and that smart equals dangerous?
Well, if that's the case, then I'm definitely intelligent now. I wear these ever since I was 30 years old, and I know people who were having to wear them when they were born. It's just so we can see things better. I mean, I can still see.
Well, we have mentioned political opinions, and so the comment section is going to be alive with people telling me that I'm wrong.
Sorry.
They won't be able to say why I'm wrong, but they're going to tell me I'm wrong. They agree with me on everything but politics, but they don't tell me exactly what they disagree with on politics because they don't have a defensible thing. All they can do is associate me with other people who said things I didn't say, as if I said those things. So
that's the way the world is right now, is that they're going to make false assumptions. And that's the one thing I can't stand. And I mean, the old saying that you make an ass and a you out of me to assume something, it's true. And you don't ever want to assume anything from the get-go because you're just using your own opinion and your own incredulity for whatever reason. Like, for example, there was a guy walking down the street at one point, right? Let's just say that he saw someone else that was wearing a red shirt. And the guy decided to say, hey, asshole, can't stand your red shirt. The guy's day is ruined. Maybe the guy liked the red shirt. Maybe his mother gave it to him. Who freaking knows? This asshole just said something that ruined the guy's day. Why? Because maybe at one point he got touched inappropriately by a guy wearing a red shirt. Or maybe, I don't know, he's half bull and doesn't like the color red. Who knows?
You'd be surprised at the idiotic criticisms that I get. I just have always gotten from anybody that I don't know what it is about their own life that they're so upset about, but they want to tell me something terrible about me, about my appearance, about my background, about whatever they assume, again, about, remember, this is just a first assumption. This is your own prejudice because of my appearance. This is divinely provided by God.
What does that mean? Yeah, obviously you're made in God's image, right?
Yeah, well, I am. I don't know about so much. I've read
everything. Absolutely.
Yeah, God has a blue goatee.
Better. Absolutely.
All right, so I'm gonna have to bail. I'm gonna let you make a final closing comment here. Just be aware and take a look at the chat, or don't. Take a look at the chat if you've got time and you just need something to make you unnecessarily angry.
Oh, I'm very certain that I am going to probably be corrected, or I'm going to be called incorrect on a lot of things.
Yeah, I don't find
I'm not right about everything.
I find people telling me that I'm incorrect, but not being able to correct me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
not being able to show that they in fact are correct, or that I actually am not.
And you've said this before, and I've always said this to everyone I've ever worked with, is that if I'm wrong about something, okay, great. Then let's figure out why I'm wrong, and I'll move from there. But if you can't show it, or you think that I'm wrong just because of an opinion or something about what you think is right, then the onus is on you to prove it. That's how that works.
Yeah, well, Christians hate nothing more than the burden of proof.
Oh, I know. They just squirm at that concept. I have to prove my stuff? No, you have to prove it. Or they say, well, what about this? Or what about, I hate whataboutisms. Oh, that's the one thing that just pisses me off. Anyway, I don't wish to digress too much. I have nothing else really I can say. The only thing I can say is, well, I'll take that back. I can say one thing. To all those teachers out there who feel like I do about don't impose your own beliefs onto a child and let them grow on their own. Try to find a way to get back into the school system if you're not a teacher right now. We need teachers like that. We have to get people out there. If there's new schools that are popping up, I mean, I would love to see a secular school. Oh, gosh, that Satanist school guy that you were talking about who was starting that one school in the Midwest or whatever, I hope that succeeds, because we need that. We need to combat this nonsense, not to tell someone that they can't believe something. That's on them. That's on their family. They can do that. It's all about making a point to show that you can learn something and then make your own decisions. That's what our jobs are. And I really want more people out there to do that, to be okay and not be afraid of losing their jobs. We have to make this happen and hopefully get more pay from the government, because that'd be good. That's all I got.